Hello, I am going to take you through class for Monday, October 5th in 11th grade English. So we're switching completely. New unit, new everything. And the unit we'll go into is called Hopeful Journeys, Exodus, Immigration, and Exceptionalism. But the shorthand of this is just pre-colonial America. That's kind of the time we're looking at. And our topic today is the Puritans and the Pilgrims. So we were in Native America, now we're moving into the time period between 1620 and 1775. Our next unit will be the Revolutionary War, which is 1776. This is a short unit, only 2 weeks long. Our central text is going to be something called Middle Passage by Robert Hayden. I'll introduce that later this week, and we'll work on that all next week along with the assessment for that unit, the unit. Today, I just want to set up the concepts of religious liberty and the Puritans and Pilgrims, who really in early America embody that religious liberty. And then we'll move through the questions about, well, what does that mean for America? First, our poem, The Ghost of Walter Benjamin Walks at Midnight. Short poem. This is a sestet from his book Sestets. Just means a 6-line stanza. Charles Wright used to teach EVA. The world's an untranslatable language without words or parts of speech. It's a language of objects our tongues can't master, but which we are the ardent subjects of. If tree is tree in English, and albero in Italian, that's as close as we can come to divinity, the language that circles the earth, and which we'll never speak. So 6 lines, but he's playing with those line breaks. You can see they're breaking across the page later. Love this poem. I picked it because that word divinity is tying up some of the things we'll be speaking about today. When I say religious liberty, what I really mean is this concept of divinity, freedom to choose what is divine to oneself. And that is relatively unique in the world still, but America is the country that embodies it. And so we're going to consider that, starting with the Puritans and the Pilgrims. So here we go. I'm going to begin with a PBS documentary called God in America. I'm a little nervous that you won't be able to watch it if I put it in the video, so I've linked it to the daily agenda. It's here, and it's on pbs.org. I'll be flagged for copyright if I record it here. Instead, I'm directing you to go watch it. I'd like you to watch the first 4.5 minutes. It's going to take you through, why are we even talking about religion in America? What would that be good for? There's supposed to be a separation between church and state, and this is a public school. The documentary does a really nice job at setting up exactly. In the public domain, the state domain, there is a freedom to talk about anything that's regarding belief, that Americans have the freedom to believe or be freed from belief. That's unique to this nation. It's at the heart of our national identity. So I really like the way this documentary from PBS puts it. So go watch the first 4.5 minutes and then come back here. Press pause. Okay. So the questions we're going to explore in this unit, all I'm blocking there is the word unit. What does it mean to be exceptional? How does that impact your values and actions? How has the principle of religious freedom been dreamed of in America? And how have different groups desired liberty of one kind or another? So the unit really is about liberty, religious liberty, and then liberty in a more generalized sense. But I'll just go ahead and take it to mean that liberty is religious and spiritual liberty. Liberty is this part of you that is free. And religion and spirituality are part of that core for a lot of these people claiming it. So they would not see a difference between religious liberty and liberty. They would think of those things as the same. So we're going to do something similar. We're going to step back and consider liberty as a concept that connects religion and spirituality into its promises, the promises of liberty. And along with that, its contradictions. So our central concept number 1 is that America, I'm going to read this, it's a little askew on your screen. America is a place defined by the freedom to believe and to be free from belief. Some central tenets we want to set forth here: that America is the most religiously diverse nation on earth, that it has no national religion, which is relatively unique, especially in the course of human history until 17th century when America was collecting these Pilgrims and Puritans we're going to talk about today. And it's instead served as a refuge for people of many faiths. The freedom to worship as one sees fit is central to our national creed, our national belief system. And the Constitution created by the founders deliberately separated church and state. Church, religion, spirituality, and state, government. Nevertheless, religion is intimately connected to our country's history. So you can't really talk about history without talking about religion, because it's such a motivator for so many of the migrations that happen, including the one we're thinking about today. Second is that this will come up in the documentary that we're using as a sort of text these first couple of days. The story of America is, it wants to be anyway, an exodus story where people moved away from old worlds, seeking new worlds of liberty. And we'll define exodus story. In stories in both Judaism and Christianity, there is Moses, a Hebrew leader who delivered his people out of slavery in Egypt into Canaan, the land that God had promised them. So it says Old Testament book of Exodus, that's the Christian Bible, but this story exists in Judaism as well. And here, on this side of the screen here, let me move my camera. Many groups have journeyed to America, both before its independence, obviously afterwards, because that's still true, in search of the promise of religious freedom. To these groups, the Exodus story has symbolized God's promises and provision for their future. Now, I want to stop for a moment and say, not necessarily that that's something that people willfully believed as they went seeking religious freedom, but that early on, the Puritans, Pilgrims absolutely believed this Exodus story. The Exodus story, we're using more of a literary allusion that when people perceived of themselves coming into America, in some ways, some cases, especially the ones we're considering in this unit, that story was really meaningful to them. And we're going to see it repeated in other texts throughout the course, including the civil rights movement. So we want to bring in the Exodus story as a corollary text to consider, because the very heart of its message about freedom from oppression will define America's Constitution, its Declaration of Independence, and so many other things that are important to our history. And then lastly, here we've tried to move into Exodus as a lowercase e concept that could apply to anybody. American Exodus stories involve the most hopeful and uplifting promises of this new nation, as well as some of its darkest realities, which is where we will go next week. All right, so why isn't this a big deal? Isn't religious freedom a normal thing? No, it really isn't. Religion in European countries was heavily intertwined with political power and authority. And we see that in the creation of a schism between Catholicism that predominated the continent and then Christianity that England espoused, that gave birth to the Puritans and the Pilgrims, who we meet soon. Subjects were required to practice whatever religion the rulers established as the official faith, and that was true throughout many nations in the world for many thousands of years. And I'll try to move away from Europe as a construct into other parts of Africa and Asia, where it might be that they're following a different faith, not the faith that we'll talk about with our Pilgrims and Puritans today, but similar constructs were at play. Somebody is telling you who to worship. It wasn't a big deal in the European sense when Catholicism was the only Christian church in the West. But after the Protestant Reformation, a lot of people wanted to practice their faith as they chose, and many rulers objected. Hence the Mayflower. So the Mayflower, here is a depiction of the different levels of the ships. 120 people on board, a lot of people. There were supposed to be 2 ships, but one couldn't make it. It was filled with pilgrims who wanted to establish religious liberty for themselves, to practice how they saw fit. And they left England on their boat, on the Mayflower, and they sought this space, this new place where they could be free to be their own rulers. They meant to go to Virginia, but at the time, that was Northern Virginia, really far north, further than we think of it as now. The Virginia colony was kind of all up and down the eastern seaboard at the time. The charter gave them all sorts of access to land. So they meant to go to Virginia, but not Virginia as we know it. It would have been even further north. Anyway, they landed in New England because of storms, and they formed the Plymouth Colony in 1620. So they left the Church of England, and this is the point, that had Protestantism as its national religion. But it wasn't holy enough for the Pilgrims. They wanted it to be even more selective in some cases, or more rigorous. They believed God had already chosen who'd gone to heaven. Those were the elect. This is very Calvinist thinking, and encouraged living a perfect life to prove that you belonged to that elite few. Emphasis on simplicity, plain living, obedience to God, and the Bible. So, I'll keep reading. They set up a government by religious leaders, which is a theocracy, not a democracy. And they were okay with being ruled by their religious beliefs. They just didn't want anyone else to tell them what to believe, but they were okay with telling their own subjects what to believe. That simplicity, imagine somebody who's just only wearing what they absolutely need to wear, only carrying what they absolutely need to carry. A pilgrim, it's not a word that they made up, is somebody who's on a journey seeking spiritual cleansing of some kind and being really bare bones in what they carry. And then there are the Puritans. The Puritans came over and formed the Massachusetts Bay Colony, so not the same as the Pilgrims, and I'll get into that in a minute, about 10 years after the Pilgrims. They too wanted to fix the Church of England because it wasn't holy enough, just like the Pilgrims. Their governor was John Winthrop, and he was reminding them similarly that they were supposed to be living in a perfect way, a perfect settlement, and that they have to get it right. Any one dissenter would throw the whole enterprise off. So he had to keep them together and to keep them perfectly together. So here we have it, a representation of the two different colonies. The Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts, a little bit further south, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, formed 10 years later. I knew when I was a kid, I just did not understand the difference between these two. So I want to spend some time setting that up for you all. All right, so Pilgrims versus Puritans, seriously, what's the difference? And here are my mnemonic devices. Mnemonic devices just meaning memory tricks. Pilgrims. Pilgrims are people who are on any journey seeking spiritual cleansing. It does not have to even be spiritual. You could make this a term that fits a secular purpose. The more common reason we might use this language today is the pilgrims who are traveling to Mecca as part of their Islamic faith. That's a pilgrimage. And we talk about making pilgrimages, even in joking terms, to like the best hamburger restaurant in the nation. Like you would make these journeys to get to a destination that's going to offer something of significance, of even divinity. Hamburger, even something like life-changing would be the strongest example. So a pilgrim. And in this case, the pilgrims are humble in their dress and their manners. But in all cases, if the destination is compelling enough to you, you wouldn't be so concerned with how you look or what you have. You would be focused on the thing you're going for. You'd be focused on that destination. And they might even seem desperate, the pilgrims, desperate for reaching this place. So this is the way I feel about the movie The Way, because I really like Emilio Estevez. I always have since I was a kid and watched Mighty Ducks. And it's all about the pilgrimage that he and his dad take in that movie. So that's the Pilgrims. And I kind of like them better. And then there's the Puritans. They came over in a very similar way, like on a boat to get away from England. But they really conceive of their own society as being pure. If you think you're really pure, if you think you've done nothing wrong ever, and that you need to hold that standard up for yourself and everybody around you, you're probably kind of a jerk, and so were they. That's the way I think of it. They were still God-fearing, but they were proud, determined to stay pure, the Puritans. And so here is my way of whittling that down to try to create a little bit of a distinction for you. The Puritans, God-giving superiority, very high expectation of personal behavior, conformity of the society. Pilgrims, more forgiving, more accommodating, more welcoming. Both important to early America and important now in the spirit of those ideas. So we're doing a new STEM today. The Puritans and Pilgrims came to America, but we're doing before, after, if statements instead. Try that in your journals. Check out my other video if you're not sure what to do.